I just
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
So yes.
All right. Okay. Let's just set up, I guess, and just since we're not going to be putting up any signs, he doesn't let us put the signs up. Remember that gentleman from last time? He came out.
Oh, so that's
he
a
yelled and
regular.
left.
That's a regular occurrence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he came out. He yelled and left.
I mean, that guy was ready to go back to NAM. I mean, he was pretty serious.
He was joking with me.
Let's do it here so we can put the signs in.
There's a press conference today. What are you talking about? How are you guys? I'm hoping that people are not.
It's so This seems to be fighting.
Let me do it.
I was just going home and seeing that when that's I'm not sure if you can even see the forest of it. Like how is it
Oh,
like
we're so
power
seeing
city?
it.
Is it
Yeah, no, we're definitely seeing it.
There's being like a swell of support.
Oh yes, yeah, and especially in the Arab world. It's beyond that as well, but it's especially strong. Yeah, and people really know about this letter. They know about abandoned Harris. Oh yeah, it's really getting a lot of press. So it's great.
No, thanks so much. And actually, we should probably.
This is Brother Mark.
We've been
So I couldn't come, but I will.
Okay, Brother Pastor.
You need to tell me, you cannot tell me just she's not.
Is she coming? It's like, what is that?
I mean, you could take a few, but I'll say it's limited.
So I
Oh, at the airport, not just your flight.
That's right. My flight is 2 hours.
Because if
Yeah,
it's yeah, no, if your flight's there, then we have to like just quickly
Get it over with.
Yeah,
1:30,
exactly.
you should make it like
Oh yeah. Yeah, 1:30 or a little later than that. So if we go over an hour, that's not a problem.
Oh,
Yeah.
we definitely shouldn't do any more than that. Yeah, and usually we never go. Yeah, exactly. And so, are you getting
They're definitely more interested. I mean, they're always, they're a little more respectful, and we're not getting very aggressive. But yeah.
Essentially, one of the worries has been that our media teams there might be but it sounds like throwing this or that hasn't been more than.
Well, I think the Democrats are winning, and the Republicans are out there. So we're getting a lot of stuff on social media, but that happened ever since the article came out showing that we were basically doing the war. So this is just more of the same. And if they don't like it, we can just, do a weapons embargo. And they can fix this. Hey, don't wait for us. Yeah. Right, we're not getting your way on this at all. Don't blame it on us. They're just trying to distract us.
By the way, I know
picked up your telepathic message. Walaikum salam, sister. I'm well.
Something that
Yeah, same. I was like,
but they will worry that
I had nothing at 12:30 just as and nobody's
No, we don't need to take real stress.
I'll hold this. I'll stay with him.
And great, I mean, we just got to clarify exactly which questions are exact questions.
I know. Really question what did that?
Who the demographic
Exactly.
and how new they are. So it's like probably have less than 20.
Oh yeah, no. It's more like
And the most important thing is for people to feel confident that they're right. They don't have to prove themselves to anybody. They don't have to apologize for something. Their needs, it really is all
Could I
about
have
the
one of
courage
these
and
signs
their
that she
convictions.
said? I would rather
Having the
put
courage
her
and their
name
convictions and the rest will follow. And
even
it's just
though
like
you know the
really
message, I'd rather.
yes. BS, this is on you. You can fix it. And you don't own my vote. You have to earn my vote. And earn it.
exactly. No, and thanks for doing that. Your courage. I'm seeing how people really resist. You're just like persist.
Thank you so much. No, this is my nephew, my sister, his mother. She ran to the
It's not
car.
new to me.
This
I've
is
been doing this
Dawood.
for 20 years. And everything we were afraid of has come to pass. So I just feel like our concerns and our solutions have been solved.
That's great.
We don't have a lot of time.
I know.
It's blowing up right now. The way things are blowing up.
But yeah, let's. I think we should probably.
Yeah, but is there anything you can say? Because I was going to say sort of broad maybe for 10 to 15 minutes. It's hard to pay attention outside. So.
Oh yeah, I was thinking. I was everything. No, he couldn't.
No, this is just fine. This is just fine. Oh, Nana, she's a miracle worker. She's a miracle
Well, they don't want us to know, right? They don't want us to know. I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you. Your son is my nephew now. So we're finally.
Yeah, so we kind of, you can cut on around like 2008.
Oh.
I got one. A bunch of people all have one. I think we might just
I'm gonna be one of the
I think it was like a nice little
right. But I'm also
yeah.
yeah, I live in Kansas.
Yes, yes. So, I guess
Maybe people in Christians in the city have tried to offer
you don't do you?
I don't. I to be fair, I completely forgot about the money.
Yeah, no.
Also, don't have. We can ask them.
Well, actually,
Well, can folks oh, as a protest. And can folks
there you go, my sweetheart. You are abandoned Harris too.
What are they? Like, I knew I would have
No, I practice in the car.
Yeah, no, you're
Yes, I'll go get it.
This is more fitting for her.
You're cute.
line set. Yeah, that's okay. Oh yes.
We don't want to do it a little further up to
It's been moving.
Yeah, we could do that. Get more of the background. Yeah, like.
I mean, it's up to you. I don't know if it really matters.
What did you say?
Because these are the two main people we need to work with.
And it goes nice with the sides.
Who feel like this?
And then that's
Thank you for being here.
if folks can all hold a sign.
Do you have a card? Well, that's okay.
So,
Semicircle.
where's Brother Mark? Brother Mark?
More semicircle.
Oh, come in if you're, we want to for everyone to be revealed. Brother Mark, if you want to hold an abandoned marriage sign, like your co-chair from next time.
And do something with that, there's a gap so that people behind they can see.
Genocide, yeah, that's genocide.
Oh, where did you get that
Oh,
from?
really?
Yeah. The sign.
So here it's you don't want to join with the sun?
You want to trade?
I already have plenty of them in my house.
Okay,
If you are holding a sign and speaking, then I will obviously give it to you. Just do the call because sometimes I don't. And then me, Coach and Sister Farah, then Selena, then Brother Rex, then Sister Jill, and then we take a few questions, but we have to end a little on the faster end, but we will take some questions right at the end. So yeah.
Stand up here.
Yeah. You could just show the signs. So.
When we speak, should we cast your sign?
Yeah, to the person who finished speaking. So yeah, you pass the sign to the person who just finished speaking, and they'll take it and go to your place. And then the exchange will just happen. I mean, in the back of the sign, it's all, I mean, if that's too much.
He would rather not.
Oh, no.
You can wear it on the back.
I just
If we had the American flag with it, I would bring it
style.
together.
I'm gonna say ceasefire now. I'm gonna say ceasefire now as a for stylistic reasons. Do not say ceasefire now after. It's just stylistic. But yeah, it's meant to just make a certain point. But sometimes I say it and then quotes.
So should we practice?
No.
Ceasefire?
That's inshallah. Sorry. Oh yes, please.
For the media, do we need to project our voice or no? The mic should be
The mic should be. This mic should be enough. Like, will that be fine?
You project a little.
Yeah. And if you want the spelling, we can provide them all after of all the different speakers. It's far easier that way. And we could just begin. And I will begin. Is it fine to get started? Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. In the cold of Minnesota, November 1st, a call, a lone voice, speaking out the truth against this genocide, undeniable to the ear, rumbling through the country, abandon Biden. We set out on a course to speak the truth against this evil genocide perpetrated at the hands of our government. November 1st, we observed ceasefire deadline day. We set out issuing an ultimatum to the president, giving him until October 31st to call for a ceasefire. History wrote the president never called for the ceasefire. There we stood, telling the world and the American people that we voted in droves for the Democratic Party in 2020. And now, our goal, simple, to punish the president, now the vice president, to buy power by taking the blame for their loss on November 5th and send a signal to the political landscape that never can you engage in genocide and win. We came out again and again. Our launch through the country in the swing states from Arizona to Michigan to Pennsylvania. Our message simple: to continue the struggle of civil rights and to speak the truth against the rain of bombardments on a people innocent on the verge of disintegration. That we had a duty as Americans to ensure that each person on the planet is considered a light filled with worth and dignity. That is abandon Biden, abandon Harris. Our quest to remember the Martin Luther King who guides us, a light for abandon Harris. While we often remember the Martin Luther King who spoke out, who walked and sung the song, "We Shall Overcome," on bridges, and who wrote letters in a Birmingham jail, we also remember the Martin Luther King who spoke out against the Vietnam War. Here we are, the last chapter of human rights. Every human being deserves civil rights, not just Americans. And today, a great announcement. An announcement to speak to a campaign motivated and animated by the light of Martin Luther King. When we launched Abandon Harris, Abandon Biden, across the country, through the primary, erected tents, encampments, and when the vice president was nominated, again and again, our demands were simple: a permanent unconditional ceasefire and a full arms embargo. We made our demands to the American people who in overwhelming numbers want a ceasefire. And through our launches, through the primary, the encampments, our call on the vice president, again and again, silence from the administration. Here we are now, and I could tell you that as we went through the campaign, the White House sent their surrogates and a message from the president telling us that we were experiencing a tantrum. And today that tantrum is a mountain. As we set course, they said that we would return to the Democratic Party days away from the election. Mr. President, Madam Vice President, we are 27 days away from the election. And today, proof that we're never going to return to the despicable leadership that you have modeled this past year. And we have with us a leader, a person of truth, a person who spoke the word ceasefire now, arrested, who took great risks, who showed her prowess again and again for years, who's willing to take the blame when the vice president loses, a partner in truth and conscience. Our goal, to punish the vice president, to take credit. Here we can say the commitment to follow in the footsteps of Martin Luther King. In the letter of Birmingham jail, he said so clearly, to those who rejected his protest, who said it was immature and emotional, does that resonate? The words that people say about Abandon Harris since November, what about the alternative? This is emotional. What the consequence of the policies that we may endure by voting third party? Remember the words of Martin Luther King in that very letter where he spoke out to the moderates who questioned his pursuit of truth that ended up him being in prison. He said, when you accuse me of extremism, I hope to be an extremist of love and not an extremist of hate. Today with us is not only an extremist of love, but an extremist for truth. Abandon Harris endorses Jill Stein, a leader who again and again has demonstrated that she wishes to fulfill the covenant of morality that began with our founding, to correct its failings in the tradition of Abraham Lincoln, and to speak out despite imprisonment, attack, and slander. In the great tradition of our forefathers and foremothers, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and John Lewis, here you have a hero who will be valorized for decades and centuries. When we enter the classrooms, the teachers, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, if you take American 21st century history, go to page 73, November 5th, 2024, a chapter. The students questioning, wondering, the images of the attacks at the hands of our government. Students all over the country in a curriculum designed to teach goodness. The continuity of civil rights now in the 21st century. The hero and image, Jill Stein, on its pages in this textbook. Abandon Harris, side by side, a partnership. The students will ask, puzzled, confused, why did the country ask you questions and accuse you of extremism? How could the country not have known these images are clear to our great-great-grandchildren? The images enough, proof sufficient to side with the Green Party in a quest, a struggle of accountability to bring a reckoning to the Democratic Party, a reorientation to the Republicans. Two candidates despicable that deserve our rebuke, a rebuke made clear here today at the capital of Abandon Harris in Dearborn, Michigan. Make no mistake that this rumble of abandon guarantees a failure for the vice president, the loss of Michigan, and the loss of the White House. That we can depose the leaders who sit atop a superpower, a success that will happen immediately when we know the results on the 5th of November. To all those who claim they won't vote because the candidates are despicable, vote for a candidate extraordinary in spirit who continues our tradition of civil rights. Vote for a candidate who will ensure that the vice president will be defeated. An immediate action, not an action 20 years, 20 days, or even 20 minutes after the results known. An immediate action, our strategy clear. Now more than ever, the most historic election to ensure that genocide never is on the ballot in America, and that our foreign policy is a policy of goodness. Make no mistake that from the cities of Dearborn and Phoenix and Atlanta and Milwaukee, a light onto the people of Gaza and the region, that we stand for peace and the end of chaos, that we stand for truth and the pursuit of justice. When I was going through the courts in Jerusalem, remembering in 2022, conducting research with the youth, we put our message on YouTube calling for the liberation of occupied Palestine. There, in retribution, I was imprisoned, tortured, handcuffed on my hands, handcuffed my feet, burning through my nerves, burdening my every step, stripped naked, paraded through the old city, thrown into a van, taken to the infamous Mescobeya prison, processed, laces out, claustrophobic, dragged in humiliation to my dungeon cell, poorly lit, confined spaces, my company, a toilet hole in the ground. And people ask, how could you speak out? The forces would find you. The state of Israel, renowned for its prowess, its extraordinary brilliance, to hide its autocracy. How could you speak out? You have degrees, you have a PhD, are you a fool? How could you speak out? But dear brothers and sisters, our fellow Americans, how can we not speak out? That is the true question. The question that motivates this movement, Abandon Harris. I am guided by trauma. I come before the people of my country in trembling. And in our trauma, we endorse Jill Stein as the only candidate valorized by history. We expect to launch, to guide us as partners to ensure the end of the viciousness of our policies perpetrated by our government. In prison, behind bars, I met one of the youth we were working with when we called for the end of occupation. What we wanted is for people to protest peacefully, to replicate the events in Egypt of Tahrir Square. The Israeli forces didn't want it. It led to our imprisonment and the imprisonment of this young man who joined us. And when I met him in prison, anxiously he was pacing in front of me. I feigned calmness as he asked me that question I remember every day. A question that has led Abandon Harris to endorse, and it guides us every day in our strategy. He asked me, what would I do if I ever return home? I said I would speak out. And the most brilliant thing appeared, a huge smile. That for him, his joy in the midst of his torture, uncertain, married in his early 20s, with family, not knowing what's happening to them, what brought him joy is not that we would end the bombardments or make the propaganda vanish, but that he knew far, far away, people are worried about Brother Faris. People are thinking about Brother Faris. People are acting. Never say you won't vote. Vote. There is a candidate of truth and justice and peace. If you won't vote for yourself, vote for Brother Faris and put a smile on people oppressed around the world. This election doesn't merely belong to America, but to the entire world. Our actions touch every part of the planet. And every moment that we harm a single soul, the amputated bodies, the rain of munitions, the displacement, the killings, the crying children, do you not hear them? Now is the time of reckoning, a time of truth. Recall the words of Ida Wells, to shine the truth on the wrong that we see in our nation. Genocide, the greatest wrong. Human rights must be lit, even if it means punishing the vice president, for history to know forever that a small people came out and walked gently behind the curtain at the ballot box and spoke the truth. speaking truth against the pharaohs in the White House. Speak the truth. Vote. Vote is but a word of truth, a word that spreads through our nation. A vote, a voice. Shine that truth and speak it, and let the rumble continue of abandon. Speak that single word that began with a whisper, a single word of truth that will bring victory. 100 votes, 1,000 votes might be the difference between the two candidates. Vote. Vote the truth. Victory is but a word, a vote. A word. Cease fire now. Cease fire now. Cease fire now.
Good afternoon. Salam, peace and blessings be upon you all. Today is a very important day. As we gather, we cannot overlook the sorrow that weighs heavy on our hearts and shatters our souls. We have just marked the 1-year anniversary of an ongoing genocide that has taken the lives of thousands of innocent people, most of them women and children. This tragedy is happening with the complicity of the Biden-Harris administration. Kamala Harris's lack of action and continued unconditional support for these atrocities is something we will not forget, nor will we allow them to escape accountability. While North Carolina struggles to recover from devastating hurricanes and Florida is about to get hit, we and our own citizens are left without the necessary aid. Billions of dollars are being funneled to Israel to support illegal war crimes. Crimes that have now extended beyond Palestine into Lebanon, Iran, Yemen, and Syria. Even more disturbingly, we are sending American soldiers to assist in the slaughter of innocent civilians alongside the IDF. According to a report, IDF soldiers killed 2 babies under the age of 1 year per day. Each soldier. This is the sad reality we face. This is why we must support leaders who embody humanity, morality, and integrity. We need a leadership that prioritizes peace, justice, and the welfare of its own people over endless wars. That's why today, we, the Abandon Harris movement, nationally and especially the Michigan chapter, proudly endorse Jill Stein for President of the United States, along with her running mate, Dr. Rudolph Weir. Let me be clear, my fellow Americans and my dear Michiganders, the power is in your hands. It's in our hands. It is absolutely critical that you register to vote and make your voice heard by voting for Jill Stein. This election is not just another cycle. It is a moment to choose humanity, justice, and true leadership. Your vote can be the change we and the people of Gaza so desperately need. Help us free Palestine. Help us free you. Free Palestine. God bless America. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Salima Nawab. I am a co-chair of the Michigan chapter for Abandon Harris. I am a mother of 4 children, and I homeschool my children. I say that just to share that this movement is a movement of common Americans, everyday Americans that are appalled by the genocide that has been enabled by this administration. I'm here to speak today about the process that Abandoned Harris has gone through to come to this endorsement of Jill Stein. Early on, when Abandoned Biden at that time was established, when it was clear that this administration was going to enable the slaughter of thousands of innocent Palestinians, despite our cries for a ceasefire, we understood that we would eventually come to a point in November where we are going to have to tell people how to vote in a way that would ensure the loss of the party that has enabled the genocide in front of our eyes. That process involved collecting leaders from across the nation that were going to come down to a process of selecting a candidate, how we would interview different candidates, and how would we get a sense of the community's sentiments, because it is very important that we reflect the community and their values, as this is a people-powered movement, and it's a movement of the American people opposing our country's support of killing innocent people for this genocide. That process included coming up with questions that we would ask the different candidates that we reached out to. We reached out to a number of campaigns that were clear on their stance on Palestine: the Jill Stein campaign of the Green Party, Dr. Cornel West, Claudia de la Cruz. We reached out to other campaigns as well, but those were the three campaigns that showed the most interest. And we had a very fruitful process of understanding where they stand on their support for Palestine, a free and liberated Palestine, and also policies that are important to Americans here domestically, such as climate, health care, support for working families, affordable education. Our interviews went very well with all of our candidates. Jill Stein in particular was very true to what she had said in those early interviews about how she would be able to withstand the backlash of the media, which we have seen over and over again, the backlash of the Democratic Party that is threatened because we are now leaving voting for them, and they're worried that they're not going to win. And her commitment to unwavering support for Palestine. She has been arrested. She has put herself on the line many times throughout this process. She's fighting. Her and her team are fighting the Democratic Party that is trying to limit her access across states, lawsuits after lawsuits to get her off the ballot. And her team are persevering without the support of corporations, without the support of billionaires, to give Americans an option. As a homeschooling mother, I just completed a lesson with my first grader about voting and democracy. And as a first grader, he is being taught that when you elect a representative or somebody to represent your values, you have power as a voter. You should go through the process of asking questions and understanding where that leader stands on the things that are important to you when you appoint someone to make decisions for you. I think it's very obvious that both of the leaders that are given from these two parties as options do not reflect the values of Americans. We have Americans that are suffering from the horrific climate crisis that we are facing in Florida and in Southern America. We have Americans that are fighting to pay their medical bills when they're trying to take care of their children because they don't have adequate insurance. We have Americans that are making difficult choices about, do I get an education or do I have to spend years working because they don't have support from their country to get an education, which should be a right for all. My first grader he said it himself, it's very easy, we're going to vote Jill Stein. And I'm very happy that the Abandoned Harris movement has now come to a point where we are making it very clear to all Americans that you have an option. You have an option to vote somebody that represents your values. We are going to work very hard in Michigan to get out the vote, to make sure that our people are registered to vote. People feel very disenfranchised, that there's no point in voting, nobody represents me. We have an option. And so with that, I just wanted to say thank you to the Abandoned Harris movement and also to the Jill Stein movement, and to all Americans that are taking this seriously. Do not fear what is to come. Please vote your conscience, because you have power in your vote. Thank you.
Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most gracious. My name is Rex Nazarko. I humbly stand here as a advocate on behalf of the Muslim community in Michigan, joined by an array of leaders who have inspired me to undertake and do this work. I am here with a very brief and simple message to both parties. The Muslim vote is not for sale. The Muslim vote is not to be taken for granted, and the Muslim vote will cause you the election. We as a community in recent coverage have been portrayed through blanket statements as a divided community. I am here to counter that narrative. The Muslim vote is not divided. It is united and firm in their commitment to vote against genocide. November 5th will display this unity and will display this strength, and it will silence those who are trying to use the same tactic age and again of dividing and conquering our people and silencing our voices. We are here to proclaim that we will always stand in the way of injustice. We will always promote the good and forbid the evil. Not the lesser of two evils. Evil is one. And we will always stand with our conscience. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you all so very much for being here. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. And thank you to Abandon Harris. I am so humbled and grateful for your endorsement. And I'm grateful also for your very profound role in this election, serving as the conscience of the nation, standing strong and fearless, demanding an end to the genocide in Gaza being perpetrated in our name with our tax dollars and without our consent as the American people. Abandon Harris is a moral compass for a nation that is lost at sea. You have given new life to our ailing democracy by claiming the power of your vote, and by holding political elites accountable, and by refusing to let them intimidate you, marginalize you, or silence you. We are all a better democracy for what you are doing. You are serving not only the Muslim American community, you are serving all Americans who yearn desperately to end the genocide now, and that is the vast majority of Americans. It is such an honor to stand with you, Abandon Harris, today, to work to end not only genocide, but also Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia, and to end the assault on our civil liberties, our freedom of speech, our right to protest, and our freedom from mass surveillance. The political establishment has falsely weaponized anti-Semitism, labeling opposition to genocide as anti-Semitism. Well, I can tell you, as a Jew who grew up just after the Holocaust, in my view, saying it's anti-Semitic to oppose genocide is the most anti-Semitic thing one could possibly say, effectively implying that Jews are okay with genocide. There is nothing anti-Semitic in the resistance to genocide. And I will point out that Jews, Christians, and Muslims live together in peace for millennia and work together now in resisting this genocide as one human family. The issue is not religion for anyone who is trying to make it that. The issue is a political ideology, Zionism, and the ethnic cleansing that came with it. An ethnic cleansing that displaced not only Muslims, but Christians and Jews themselves. The courage of abandoned Biden to stand up to this genocide and to stand up to the harassment and the disparagement and the vilification that comes with it, your courage is contagious. And so many others now are standing up as well. In the streets, in the city councils, like in Portland, Maine, where I was just 2 nights ago, which adopted a divestment resolution just a couple weeks ago, on campuses like MIT, the very ground zero of the military-industrial education complex, that recently canceled a major Israeli weapons contract, and like the country of France, which has stepped forward and called for a weapons embargo on Israel. Never has opposition to an unjust war progressed so rapidly. Opposition to the war in Vietnam and Iraq took years to build, even though tens of thousands were being slaughtered and eventually millions were killed in each of those struggles. And now, opposition to the war on Gaza has grown faster than I have ever witnessed in my half-century of activism. So we urge all people of conscience to resist the propaganda telling you to hold your nose and vote for genocide. If you vote for genocide, you are consenting to it, you are enabling it. Don't let them talk you out of your humanity. Stopping genocide is the moral imperative of our time. Voting against genocide is not only a moral imperative, it is also a practical imperative. 2 million Palestinian lives hang in the balance right now from starvation, continued bombing and missile strikes, growing infectious disease, and much more. And now that genocide is being extended to the West Bank and to Lebanon, where an incomprehensible 80 bunker buster bombs were dropped in Beirut in Israel's assassination of the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah. According to the rules of using bunker buster bombs, they should never be used. Not even a single bunker buster bomb should ever be used in a concentrated, populated urban area. Yet Israel dropped 80 of them in Beirut, slaughtering hundreds of people. And Israel is bombing Gaza, carpet bombing Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and also Syria, Yemen, and Iran. And remember that Iran has a military alliance with Russia. So we are playing with fire. And Netanyahu has wanted nothing more than to enlarge this war and drag the United States into it, because the longer he is at war, the longer he stays out of court, and the longer he stays out of jail. So he very much has a vested interest, for all kinds of reasons, in enlarging this horrific war. And what is the Biden-Harris administration doing? They tell us that they are working diligently day and night to achieve a ceasefire. Or that is what they did tell us. Now they say that they're not even trying anymore. But even when they said they were working for this ceasefire, they in fact were encouraging Israel to expand the war and to strike out and begin hitting Lebanon. So Israel's genocidal war is now a regional war that could easily go global and that could potentially go nuclear Israel, as we all know, has nuclear weapons in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And Israel, members of Israeli government have already suggested that nuclear weapons be dropped on Gaza. So this war is extremely dangerous, extremely explosive. And remember that an exchange of nuclear weapons anywhere is a threat to people everywhere. Because aside from the power of the detonation, you also have the phenomenon of nuclear winter. And it doesn't take very many nuclear weapons, even the so-called tacticals, which our government, in all of its recklessness, has said it would not hesitate to use for tactical reasons. A limited exchange even of these weapons can lead to substantial nuclear winter, which depresses the food supply. And it's said that even something like 100 of them could lead to a major global famine. And it goes up from there if major powers begin to exchange nuclear weapons. So this war is endangering all of us, and it's also impoverishing all of us. There's some $150 billion, something like that, that have been transferred to Israel in terms of military aid over the period of Israel's existence. Some $22 billion over the course of the past year. And we are throwing these billions of dollars to promote the murder and the slaughter and the massacre of children and women and innocent civilians, while people are stranded in western North Carolina, while the victims of that hurricane were given $750 to deal with the emergency because FEMA ran out of money. Why is FEMA running out of money? Because half of our congressional budget is being spent on the endless war machine. Half and more if you include the associated agencies, Customs and Border Protection, the FBI, the Veterans Administration, which does not have adequate funding even to take care of our wounded veterans, and so on. These agencies put together with the Pentagon, and I would include nuclear weapons, which are also not part of the Pentagon budget. You add it all up, and this is well over 50% of the budget. It's said to be around 63%, well over $1 trillion a year. We need those dollars here at home. We need those dollars for health care, for 70,000 people who die in this country for the lack of health insurance alone every year. 1 out of every 3 COVID deaths was linked to the lack of health care. 50% of all Americans who rent their housing now are severely economically stressed, just trying to keep a roof over their heads. We do not have adequate low-income and affordable housing, even for middle-income people, let alone lower-income people. Yet we could be building so-called social housing as a public good. We could be providing Medicare for all to everyone as a human right. We could be providing public higher education for free, which we had in my day, and we were far less prosperous as a society. Where are those dollars going? Well, one place they're sure going is into the incredibly bloated military budget. And we can deal with our climate crisis if we had the money instead of spending a full half of our congressional budget. What that amounts to for every household across the nation is an average of $12,000 just this last year alone. These are figures calculated by Dr. Jeffrey Sachs of the economics department at Columbia University. That's your reference on that $12,000 a year. A not widely known figure, but that's what it translates to. What family can afford to be throwing $12,000 a year into the continuing murder and slaughter of children? No one. So we can fix this. This entire conflict goes away the minute the genocide is halted. And that genocide can be halted with a simple phone call. That was done by Ronald Reagan back in 1982, when the Israeli Defense Forces had also gone into Lebanon, chasing the Hamas of the day, which was the PLO. Chasing the PLO into Lebanon, where they were then slaughtering thousands of people. And Ronald Reagan said absolutely no. In fact, he used the word a Holocaust. Menachem Begin. And sure enough, the Israeli Defense Forces withdrew their forces and stopped the missile strikes and the bombing runs. Within 24 hours, it was over and done with. Dwight Eisenhower did the same thing much earlier in the 50s or the 60s. So American presidents can do this because we are funding the entire operation. It really is a proxy war because we are controlling it, we're funding it, we provide diplomatic cover and intelligence. This is effectively a proxy war. As Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense said, Israel is the unsinkable battleship for the United States in the Middle East, basically providing an outpost from which to safeguard and control the flow of oil. So we can fix this with a simple phone call. The genocide will be over and the extended war. All of the parties have said that their interest in this conflict will end the minute Israel ends this conflict. So let me tell you on day one what we can accomplish. If we are so lucky as to win this election, actually let me just say a word about winning the election. There are many ways to win this election. And you never let your opponent tell you what the win is. We define what the win is. So the biggest win is to get to the White House and turn the White House into a greenhouse and make the world a better place for it. So what would it take to do that? Well, in 2020, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters did not vote. They refused to vote for the parties of war on Wall Street and their candidates being rammed down our throats. They would not cast a vote. So 1 out of every 3 eligible voters did not vote. They tend to be young, of color, and lower income. Exactly the people to whom our social justice agenda speaks. So could we get the word out to them and encourage people to vote and to register to vote who are not registered? I wouldn't rule it out in this election. I'm not holding my breath, but on the other hand, I'm not ruling it out. And you never know how far you can go unless you aim for what it is that you really want and what it is that you really need. So we are pulling out all the stops. We are unapologetic. This country needs to remove the warmongers from power before they get us all killed. And in my opinion, the faster we do that, the better. But there are many other ways to win. There are ways to win by teaching any practitioner of genocide that they will not be reelected. And that applies to Kamala Harris. Donald Trump has said he will do the same thing. So in my view, I want to defeat them both. I don't see one as better than the other in my own view, but our views converge here. And our views converge in a campaign that is demanding an end to the genocide now. And how grassroots campaigns work is by word of mouth, by social media, by flyering, by tabling, by phone banking, and by door knocking. We are coordinating that in our campaign at JillStein2024.com, and join us if you are not already plugged in to that kind of grassroots action, because it's that grassroots action that can really kindle the fire, or shall we say spread the fire, because Abandon Harris has already kindled that fire. They have been the match that has really lit the spark of hope and of justice and of light. And there are so many people who are hungry for that message and who will stay home if they don't hear that message. But the need is out there. Gallup poll at the very start of this election year, actually in 2023, that poll showed that 63% of voters are now saying that we need a new political party independent of the major parties which have done such a poor job of serving the public interest. So the need is enormous. And when people hear our agenda, they're mobilized. So I really want to urge everyone who wants to see a future that we can live in, who wants healthcare and housing and education, and to bail out the students like we bailed out the crooks on Wall Street back in 2008 when they crashed the economy. We can do all of these things, and you can cast a vote to make it happen. And however far we get is the jumping off point to continue this struggle, because this is not going to be solved overnight. Certainly the genocide could be stopped overnight, but then we have to deal with the issue of the occupation, the ethnic cleansing, the apartheid government in Israel. So there's going to be a long-term process here which will require our continued action, our continued mobilization, and our continued insistence that we demand that the laws, the international law, be applied, that the rulings of the International Court of Justice be applied, and that human rights be applied. And that this be solved through diplomacy. We're not going to get into a nuclear war with Israel. That would not be advisable. But we can solve this. We can solve it through diplomacy. And, you know, we know how diplomatic Bibi Netanyahu is. You know, that's kind of a dead end. But when you start bringing a weapons boycott and an economic boycott into it, he has no choice. 1 out of every 3 residents in Israel now, according to a recent poll, wants to leave Israel. Their economy is crashing. Their military is incredibly overstressed. They've never conducted a war for this long. They are, you know, essentially crashing and burning right now. So this is devastating to Israel. With a continuing or growing economic boycott, they are not going to last long. So this can be readily solved if our government does not step up and begin to carry the weight for Israel, which it could well do. The American people do not want this. So the wind is at our back here. And know that the worse this gets and the more outrageous our warmongering leadership becomes, the easier it will be to mobilize the American people. And the more we can be heard, and the more the American people know that they are paying through the teeth for these endless wars, which they do not support anyhow, especially this genocide, we can have an unstoppable force to shut down this genocide and to begin to build an America that works for all of us and a world that works for all of us. Also on day 1, very briefly, aside from picking up the phone to tell Bibi Netanyahu that the war is over, we will also take AIPAC to court. We will instruct the Department of Justice to take AIPAC to court for violation of the Foreign Agent Registration Act. We will also begin to cut the military budget, which is bloated and endangers us, especially the nuclear weapons, and begin to put our dollars into true security here at home. We will also begin to push for the nuclear arms treaty, which the rest of the world has signed, just not the nuclear weapons powers. We'll also begin an antitrust lawsuit to begin breaking up the concentrated corporatized media so that we can again begin to have diverse voices who are not lapdogs to power. We need watchdogs to power. And we'll also begin to address the immigration crisis in a just and humane way. We differ from Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. They are basically lying when they say that immigrants are bringing drugs and crime. They are not. This is contrary to known statistics and studies. Instead, we need to stop the U.S. policies that are driving migrants out of their homes and forcing them to flee to this country. That is the most powerful thing we can do to solve the migration crisis, is to stop causing it in the first place by ending regime change operations, by ending the endless wars, by ending the CIA coups and government overthrows, by ending climate change, really beginning to combat that, and ending the war on drugs, which basically puts a lot of money into the pocket of the drug lords and the drug cartels, which then create the violence that drives people to flee. On day 1, we can legalize marijuana and begin to treat drug use as a public health problem, not as a criminal problem. That's the only way to effectively solve it, and that also decompresses the migration crisis as well at the same time. So every vote against genocide is a shot across the bow of the empire, announcing that its days are numbered and that we, the opposition, are getting organized and we are here to stay. This builds the pressure for a ceasefire and a weapons embargo and brings the day closer when when we will achieve them. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It is to the credit of abandoned Biden and abandoned Harris that demand was inserted into this election early and has now become a major theme. Your vote is your demand. Voting for the lesser evil disappears your demand. There is no trace of it. There is no evidence of the support to end genocide or provide health care as a human right, and so on. So do not listen to the propaganda that tells you to vote for the lesser evil. We say forget the lesser evil, fight for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We have it. The 1 out of every 3 voters that could be mobilized to stand up and vote in this election, and no one would know that they're coming because they are not polled. They are not polled. So pay no attention to the polls. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain who's trying to convince you that you are powerless. You are not powerless, you are powerful. That is what democracy is about, and we intend to use that power now like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. We can create an America and a world that works for all of us, and the power to do that is in our hands. I want to thank Abandoned Harris so very much for setting us off on this journey together, and thank you very much.
We could take a few questions.
You want to get the mic?
We could take a few questions.
Just hold it.
Yeah.
Looks good on you.
Yeah, I got one. Jill, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Is your community better off than it was 4 years ago?
So, from what I am seeing, and I would say my community, but also the community I've seen on the campaign trail, and I've been here in Dearborn. I spent a couple days ago, I was in Maine, in Portland. Before that, I spent 4 or 5 days in Texas, especially on the border. And I will tell you, what I am hearing from people is that they are hanging by a thread, that they are despairing. They do not have a secure home. They're worried about their rent. They are worried about their paycheck, which is inadequate. They cannot afford their health care. If they have health insurance, they can't afford to use it. They are worried about the storms and the drought and the heat waves. They are worried about the climate and the wildfires. And they are worried about the war, and they are horrified by the genocide. And students are incredibly distressed about what they're facing. We know from polls, 50% of people under the age of 25, 50% describe themselves as hopeless about the future. And 1/4 of them have considered harming themselves, in the last 2 weeks before the poll. So by all indicators, we are in very bad shape, and things are not getting better. They're not getting better by leaps and bounds. They're not even getting better by little bits. We see money concentrated into the hands of the wealthy few. The billionaires have basically doubled and tripled their wealth in the last 2 to 3 years, while child poverty has tripled. What's wrong with this picture? Everything is wrong with this picture, and it starts with the democracy that we do not have. And our elected officials and our major political parties, which are bought and paid for, which are serving War Machine, AIPAC, and Wall Street interests. So, people are clamoring for what we are offering. And the question is, can we get the word out? Can we break through the media silence? Can we break through the smear campaigns being fought desperately by Democrats right now, which is actually kind of funny because, it makes me laugh because these are all old, worn out smears and they can't come up with anything new. and they're mostly humiliating themselves, at least on social media. And I highly recommend, I mean, I've been so impressed that the ambushes that have been set up for us, you know, we get very stiff questioning and sometimes ambush, like on the Breakfast Club. And if you haven't watched it, I suggest you do, but especially read the comments. The comments are totally off the charts, and there are like 20,000 of them that say, I wasn't going to vote, but now I'm going out and I'm going to register green because this is what I'm about. You know, it's like as we begin to break the sound barrier here that excludes competition, you know, that it's not a democracy when competitive candidates are thrown off the ballot. That's what the Democrats do. Republicans interfere with the peaceful transfer of power, but the Democrats interfere, you know, on the front end by throwing competition off the ballot. These are both, you know, fascistic things to do. They're terrible. And this democracy is not working for us. We need to take it back. And, you know, this movement here, I think the genocide is kind of a symbol of where we are now, you know, in our larger society. We're kind of in a very dark place.
If I could, you mentioned some of the smears you face, and I think the new one would be, if this succeeds, you guys handed Donald Trump the White House. How could you have done this? Are you prepared to be viewed as the new Ralph Nader?
Well, let me just add right now, the Democrats can fix this. They can win this election right now. All they have to do is implement that weapons embargo now, and you will win the election. So they
you
are
don't want to have to
choosing.
run. You want to get this embargo and to be done with it.
Well, power concedes nothing without a demand, as Frederick Douglass said. So I don't harbor the illusion that we could just pack up and go away and the Democrats would do what they promised. They won't.
Right.
They need to have their feet held to the fire. But they can win this election, put it that way. They can absolutely win this election if the Muslim vote will believe them. And I don't know. I can't speak for that. I can't. I don't know. But let them try. Let them try. They don't even want to try. It means more to them to lose this, to continue the genocide than to actually try to win this election. So I would turn that smear right back on them and let them, you know, let them hold some responsibility here and instead of trying to scapegoat it on third parties, which is what they usually try to do.
Right.
And I think the Muslim community will also be scapegoated here. But I don't think they're going to get away with it. And the black community and the Hispanic community, which is voting for Trump. So there's a problem here, you know, and they will not debate us. They have to keep us off the debate stage, in fact, because they're terrified. They're absolutely terrified. You know, if they cared about the so-called spoiler problem, they would pass ranked choice voting, and there would be no spoiler problem. They won't pass. In fact, they fight ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting eliminates any possibility of a split vote or a so-called spoiled election. It makes it impossible. And it has other virtues as well. But they fight it tooth and nail because they rely on extortion. They need to extort your vote through fear, and they need to talk about fear because they don't want to talk about the housing you don't have, and the health care you don't have, and the future you don't have, and the education you don't have. They have to try to keep people riveted on fear, and they're really ginning up that fear right now. You know, it's one thing or another. Hey, you know, the abortion issue, they could solve that right now too. You can open abortion clinics right now in every state on federal property on military bases. Problem solved. They can do that. They want to have this problem. You know, they want to keep, you know, ginning up fear and terror in the heart of voters, and they don't want to hear, you know, an opposition point of view pointing out that they could solve this in the blink of an eye, as they could have for the last, you know, 30, 40 years. They could have codified Roe many, many times. You know, this was in their hands, and both Joe Biden and Barack Obama promised, as part of their campaign pledges, that they would codify Roe. The first thing they did when they got to office, and they never managed to get to it because it was a great fundraising issue.
All right,
So
well, just
we say BS.
yeah, we just close it here, and folks are, I know, cold and holding signs, and feel free. Yes, thanks everyone, by the way, for coming. This is
Just
really
tell the
amazing.
Democrats that handing the White House to Trump is on them, not on us.
So they're not even offering the current they used to give us. They have gone so very far. That's amazing that they're not even offering anything. They think that we can vote for them. Nothing. Why should we vote? This is a free pass to them. We're not going to give them.
So this is where the Muslim vote is going now. This election.